Hey, Durant here with Tattoo University, and I'm just going to talk about a couple of things before this video. It's not really a video about how to make homemade tattoo equipment. If you are a good tattoo artist and you know the fundamentals of tattooing, you should be able to make some kind of equipment that you can tattoo with around your house, or find a way to tattoo somebody. If somebody pointed a gun at your head and said you needed to tattoo somebody or you would get shot, and you are a good tattoo artist, you should be able to do something like this. It's more to explain some of the fundamentals behind tattoo machine tuning and the reasons for certain things on your tattoo machines. And the same fundamentals that apply to your tattoo machine would apply to a homemade machine like this. I see a lot of tattoos that have been done in this manner, and usually they're really faded because the tattoo ink was really bad or the person went too deep with the tattoo needle. You don't really get really clean lines this way because these machines are not set up for that. They are very limited in what they do. Tattoo machines are built specifically for tattooing the proper way, and you can get the job done with this. You can do a pretty decent job if you're a skilled artist. That's another thing. If you're a good tattoo artist, you should be able to tattoo with anything. You should be able to do a good tattoo with this, because if you know the fundamentals behind it, you would know how to tattoo with this. It is pretty much set up like a machine with a single needle in it. But if you don't understand how a single needle works and you struggle to use one, you'll probably have a hard time tattooing with something like this. The more you know about tattooing, the better. And if you run into any situation, you should be able to adapt and overcome. I would think that if I ever found myself incarcerated, I could still get along pretty good with my tattooing. If you are tattooing, you need to have a little perseverance. You need to have a little gumption, whatever you want to call it. You need to be tough enough to not give up, because the first couple of years at least are going to be pretty rough. It's going to be pretty frustrating, especially if you don't have a mentor there with you teaching you how to do these things. You need to have the attitude to keep pushing forward and to tell yourself, no matter what happens, I'm going to learn this skill and learn how to do it properly. And we always want to move forward from wherever we're at. So if you are using something like this and you have the ability to get something better, you want to save up some money and do that. Tattoo machines have grommets and armature bar nipples so that your needle doesn't come off, so that's an improvement. Disposable needles and tubes that are set up so your needle doesn't wiggle around, so you don't have to worry about that, unlike a machine like this. So I made this pretty much for this video and just for show. I'm not going to use this on anybody. It was more just for fun. And if you actually want to watch a video where they explain how to make one of these, then there's probably better videos out there. Really, I just made this so that I could explain to you guys some of the fundamentals of a tattoo machine. Took this apart. What we have here is our motor with a counterbalance on the front to make this vibrate, because as a toothbrush it just vibrates. But we don't want this to vibrate. We actually just want this to push a needle up and down. So we're going to have to remove this counterbalance. You can see that it kind of looks like a camshaft, and would work the same way if I could just drill a hole in the middle of that, or find a way to attach a needle to that. And then it just has something to attach the battery, which is your power source. And then on the back we have a on-off switch to turn our power on and off. Now let's look at a tattoo machine and see how this resembles a coil machine. The coil machine doesn't use a motor to run. Your coil machine uses these electromagnets right here. Magnetism to pull down this armature bar that turns on and off quickly. That's how this runs. This is like the motor for the machine. But it's not an actual motor. It's two electromagnets, or one or three, depending on what kind of machine you have. But on a rotary machine, if I took this apart, we would have a motor in there. And the motion from the motor spinning around, the rotation of the motor, which on this hammer rotary, you spin this around and this goes up and down. So it uses that motor to create a motion to move the needle up and down. So rotaries have motors in them. Coil machines use electromagnets, but they all have a power source, like our battery here. We would connect this to our clip cords and then to our power supply. Same thing here, clip cords, power supply. And then your foot switch would be the on-off button. Or you can actually have an on-off button, just depending on your setup. So what I'm trying to get to here is the homemade tattoo machine relies on the same principles as a regular tattoo machine. And if you think about how you tune a tattoo machine, or how you make a homemade tattoo machine, it will help you set up your machine better. If you know how to tune a machine, it's going to run better. You're going to get better results when you tattoo. So we have our motor and our on-off switch. So that would be like our coils here, but then you need something to mount everything on. On a tattoo machine, this would be your machine frame. And with a rotary machine, it would be either the frame or the housing for your motor. On this machine is everything here that is holding the motor in place. So for your homemade machine here, here's your motor, but you need to hold it in place. You can't just hold on to this motor like this and attach everything to it. There's several components that need to go on a tattoo machine. You have the machine itself, but then you also have a tube and grip and a needle. The tattoo machine is set up to run with a needle connected to it and the vise. The vise holds your grip. It holds it in the correct spot, your tube and grip, and the armature bar holds the needle in the correct spot. And then it runs also. So what you need is a motor that runs, but you also need a frame to go along with it. Something to go on, something to hold your tube and needle, as well as your motor. On a tattoo machine frame, usually the frame is either cast or welded, and then you would drill holes in this so that you can attach your coils. For this motor, we are just going to bend this spoon down here until this part breaks off, and then we're going to bend this into an L shape to hold our makeshift tube, needle, and this part to hold our motor at a 90-degree angle to each other. Now that's important. If you look at everything on a coil machine, most of it is at a 90 degree. The armature bar hits the top of the coils at a 90 degree so that your needle goes straight. Now this isn't always true, but it's better when it works this way. Your clip cord should hook up at a 90 because sometimes when it's off, it's a real pain in the butt to connect your cord. If it's at a 90, it works better. Your frame should be at a 90. Most of the angles on your machine are a 90-degree angle. So what we're going to do here is bend this spoon so that we get a 90-degree angle for our frame. This is a mechanical pencil here, and this is going to be our makeshift tube and grip. The way the needle is set up is that the tip is specially designed for the needle you are using. Now with this, we are using guitar string, and this would be like a single needle because it's just one piece of string. Now the tip for a single needle like that would be a 3-round liner, and that's kind of the shape of this mechanical pencil here. So what we have to do is make sure that we can run this through this tip and there's enough room where it's not going to get caught, and it's not going to wiggle around very much. It's just going to go in and out of this tip without moving around, but it's going to have enough room also for the ink to go through there. Okay, I'm going to switch to this mechanical pencil here because I like this one better. If you take the tip off of this one, you can remove the tip, but you can see that it has a little device in there to keep the lead from moving around, which in our case is going to keep this guitar string from moving around. And it has a little funnel that helps guide this needle or guitar string right down to the tip. So you can see I have better movement here. There's no wiggle back and forth. This is what we want with a tattoo needle. We don't want a lot of movement or side to side movement. We just want up and down. Now another note here, since I cut this off, there's a lot of jagged edges on this. And jagged edges are your enemy in tattooing because they snag your gloves, they snag your skin, they get your client. They're just pokey. So if you're building a machine, you want to smooth everything off, round everything off, make it nice to handle, so that you don't get poked when you're holding this. You don't leave edges on things. Everything you round the edges off. That way, if I'm touching this with my gloves on, nothing snags my gloves. Everything's just nice to the touch. If you leave corners on things, it causes problems. If you leave a corner on your washer, it could cut in your spring could break. So you just round everything off. Make everything nice and smooth. So what we're going to do on this is sand this down, round this off so that it doesn't snag on anything. With a motor by itself, this will spin around, but there's no movement there. And you need movement to tattoo because you need the tattoo needle to pierce the skin, go up and down into the skin. And the movement that this has right now is just a circle. There's no up and down movement there. So they make a cam or a camshaft that attaches to this, and what that does is it takes the round movement. It would go in a perfect circle. It's not even moving around. It'd be more like this. You're taking this movement and you're attaching this to it. You can see there's two holes there, one in the middle and then one that goes around the outside. Now if you attach something to that, that gives you the up and down movement. As this spins around, you have your needle attached to it. It gives you the up and down movement. And the bigger this is, the further away this hole is from the center, the more up and down movement you have. So if you want a short stroke, you put that offset real close to the center and it moves around and gives you a shorter stroke. If you get a bigger camshaft or a camshaft where that offset is further from the middle, you get a longer stroke. So if you want a short stroke machine, you're closer to the center. You move out to the outside, you get a longer stroke machine. Short stroke, liners. Longer stroke, color packers. So you adjust this for the tattooing you are going to do. Same thing applies for a camshaft. A shorter camshaft, you get a shorter stroke. A longer camshaft, you get a longer stroke. So typically a shorter stroke, small camshaft liner, medium for shading, long for color packing, just depending on how you tattoo. But you need to know that to adjust your machine for a rotary, you can adjust the camshaft, the offset, or even however your rotary is set up, adjust the hit or the stroke length to adjust your machine. And with a coil machine, if you want to adjust it, you need to adjust your springs and how much distance you have on your armature bar here. The travel your armature bar goes up and down. It's the same thing as your offset here, how far it goes up and down. So with your armature bar, the travel, the stroke of the machine, how far up and down does your armature bar go, will affect how far your needle travels. A really short stroke will be a faster machine. A longer stroke will be a slower running machine. So you can put together this homemade machine, but if you want to make adjustments to it, you would have to adjust the stroke length or how fast your motor is running. This machine probably runs on 4 volts. This machine can go 4 volts. Typically you go from 4 to 8 volts. This battery here, if I'm reading this correctly, says it's a AA battery, 1.5 volts. So is that going to be enough to run this motor to get the correct penetration into your skin to tattoo? And if you are only running a single needle, that might be enough, because you don't need a lot, because only that much is going into the person's skin. So it makes entry very easily. Now if you had a mag that had a bigger surface area, it's got to push into the skin, so it needs to have a little push behind it. But if you take away all those needles and you only do one needle, it's going to slip into the skin easier. So with a single needle, you don't need a lot of force behind it for it to enter the skin. So 1.5 volts might be all you need. We're going to find out. Now, this counterweight might have been pressed on here or glued on here. So instead of taking it off, I just drilled a hole right next to it so that I can put my needle in there. Because what you would have done at this point would be to add something like this, or a button that you put a hole in, so that you pretty much could have just done that. So all I did was drill a hole into that instead of adding another piece to it. So what I've done here is I've removed the front of the toothbrush here so that we have access to the motor. And I've also attached the on-off switch so that I can turn it on and off whenever I need to. Now I've also enclosed this to keep particles from getting in the motor and to keep it cleaner. Now some of the machines I appreciate are the machines that are actually simple, more simple, without a lot of parts, because things will hide in there. If you get particles on your machine, it's a little difficult to clean if you have a lot of parts on it. So the less parts you have, if you have something really simple like this, where you can just wipe this down, put some maticide on it, you know, it's going to stay a lot cleaner, and there's not as many little crevices that you have to dig into to clean out like you would have on a machine like this. So for me, I appreciate kind of the simple things in life. I appreciate the machines that aren't really complicated, these machines that just keep running no matter what, you know, because the more parts you have on there, the more parts that can malfunction or break. So I appreciate a machine that's simple, easy to clean. So I put the case back on this. Your needle, when you tattoo, needs to travel up and down the middle of the tube. I see this on a lot of machines that are put together incorrectly. The armature bar nipple will actually be too far forward. What you get is the needle rubbing on the tube, and this gives it extra tension. This makes it so that you turn up your voltage, and it also makes ink spit everywhere because your needle's not in the correct spot. It needs to be in the middle of the tube so that nothing interferes with its motion. It goes up and down, travels up and down the middle of the tube, and then in the tip, it needs to sit in the bottom of the tip. which is usually why you give it a bend right here and then put a rubber band here so that it will hold your needle into the bottom of the tip. Now with this guitar string, if I put a rubber band here, it's not really going to help. So what we have is a tube in the end of this tip here holding it in its place. Sometimes they make these little guides that you clip onto the end of your tip that will hold your needle in place instead of the rubber band. There's different ways you can keep your needle from moving around. Some rotaries don't recommend that you use a rubber band to hold the needle in place, or they will have a little tension device right here that will hold your needle where it needs to be. So on a homemade machine like this, you need to make sure there is some kind of device here that is going to keep this needle from moving around. And you also need to make sure that it is not rubbing on these sides of the tubes. So when you put it together, you want to line it up so that it travels right down the middle of that tube there before you attach anything. And check the stroke on this to make sure that when it's moving, it's still traveling down the center of this tube. If we were tattooing with a tattoo needle, you would have your needles at one end, the needle bar, and then the loop at the other end. And you would use a grommet or a paper towel or some kind of way to disappear quick. So you would use a grommet or a paper towel or some device to keep this needle nice and snug on the end of your armature bar nipple, because the armature bar nipple is just this piece of metal here. And what that does is it makes it so you need to put a little pressure on there and it holds your needle in place. Because what you really don't want while you're tattooing is for your needle to be moving around. For our little homemade device here, we need to have a way to attach the needle to our offset here and our motor so it'll spin it around so we get that up and down motion. So what I've done is I've just bent a little loop like you have with your needle here that I'm going to insert into here, and there's a little catch behind it so that it holds it in place. You just need to make sure that this needle doesn't come out or move around too much while this is spinning around. This is my Dr. Fresh tattoo machine. So here's my little disclaimer, my little public service announcement for this video. I'm not really encouraging you guys to use these machines. I'm actually encouraging you guys to go and get the proper machines. And I'm telling you, this toothbrush cost $1.50. The spoon I had to get from somewhere. I had to go get a guitar string from a buddy, and I had to get a mechanical pencil all together and some ink. I mean, probably cost me about $10. Had to get the electrical tape. I just ordered this machine online for about $10, the same price as this machine right here that I had to make. And it came to me ready to go. And it's probably going to work a lot longer and a lot better than this. Now, yes, I need the power supplied for this, but for another $20, can probably get a clip cord and a power supply. I know there's people out there, and I'm not hating on those people who are using these, because we all have different circumstances. You might actually be incarcerated and be tattooing this way. So, no, I'm not hating on someone who might be using these, but if you are using these, do it in the safest way possible. And the same rules apply to you as to everybody else. Learn about disease and sanitation. Wear gloves. Use barrier protection. The same thing applies for this as it would for any of these other machines. We are going to wrap this up. And we're not going to reuse anything. If you actually tattoo somebody with this, and you're going to use it again, you need to remove the needle and the tube and dispose of that. Get rid of it, throw it away, and put a new one on every time. Hydrogen peroxide or bleach is not safe. You're not going to clean this or sterilize this. And with a lighter, you're not going to sterilize any of this stuff. You need to use new equipment every time. A new needle, a new tube, every single time. This is a single needle. You need to use the correct techniques that you would use with a single needle. Single needles are not the easiest to use. And there are better needle groupings that are easier to tattoo with. That's why we have rounds. And this is probably a round 7 or a 9. And there's a lot of needles here. You can see there's a group of needles. And a group of needles works better than one needle. One needle, the ink goes around the needle, but it doesn't hold on to it very much. If you have a group of needles, what happens is the ink gets in between the needles and it holds on to the needles. The needles hold more ink, which allow you to put more ink into the skin. With a single needle, that's just one needle like this, you need to work at getting it in the skin. Some cheap tattoo ink I use for practicing with and not tattooing with. We're just going to go for it here. So with a single needle, you need to build up your line. Do like circle motions. You need to run a line. There you go. And you're going to get a really weak line, so you need to kind of build that up. Either run a line right next to it, or you need to do little circle motions next to it to kind of build it up a little bit. And you can also do some quicker hand movements. You can see this way you can build up some shading. If you slow your hand down here, you'll get more marks, which will make it darker, and then speed it up as you go out. It'll lighten it up. And you can see in this way you'll get a dark to light shading here. Alright. So you can see we can do shading, we can do a line. So if you are using these for whatever reason, if you're underage, if you're incarcerated, or if you just think that it's cool to tattoo with things like this, then do it correctly. Same rules that apply to the people tattooing in a shop should apply to everybody who is not in the shop as well. Use barrier protection, tattoo safely, learn about disease and sanitation. I'm going to tell you right now, dipping this in hydrogen peroxide is not going to do anything. You might as well just dip this into a bubbling can of 7-Up soda, because that's all hydrogen peroxide does. It bubbles up and removes particles out of a wound. So how is that going to sanitize a needle? It's not. There are things that survive bleach, so dipping this in bleach is not going to help you either. Always throw away your tube and your needle and do not reuse them. So I want to encourage everybody to tattoo safely and always try to improve. If this is where you started, there's a lot of room for improvement here. Try to find somebody who will mentor you. The best way to learn how to tattoo, if you are under 18 and it's illegal for you to tattoo yet, is to practice your artwork. Don't worry about the tattooing side of things yet. Don't make these and tattoo your buddies with them. The worst thing you can do as a tattoo artist is to give your buddy a disease or damage your buddy. If you are underage and you want to be a tattoo artist, focus on your art skills. The number one tip I'm giving people to improve your tattoo work is to practice your artwork. Learn about drawing, painting. That will get you further than making a homemade tattoo machine. The number one rule is to tattoo safely. Never damage your buddy or give your buddy a disease. You can come back from a tattoo that's infected or a tattoo that had too much damage to it. But if you give someone a disease, it can alter their life in a negative way. For the rest of their life, they will not be the same person. They will be damaged. They will have to deal with whatever repercussions. If you use a dirty needle on somebody, you will affect that person negatively for the rest of their life. And you will have to have that on your conscience for the rest of your life. So, no matter where you are, no matter how you are tattooing, do it safely. So my best advice, if you are underage and you are trying to learn how to tattoo, is maybe before you cut up your mechanical pencil or your pen, you can use that and just practice drawing with it. And do a lot of artwork. Instead of cutting up your pencils, keep working on your art skills. And that will get you a lot further than trying to tattoo on people at this point. Once you're 18, you can find a mentor and start learning how to tattoo properly. And then that way also, you won't make as many mistakes that you're going to regret later. You can take your time and do things properly, and you'll be proud of what you have, some of your older tattoos, instead of being ashamed or trying to cover up all of your old tattoos. You'll be proud of them. With more art experience, you're going to know what looks good and what looks bad. If you just take your time and learn correctly, you'll make better decisions, and when that time comes, you'll put a better tattoo on yourself instead of something that you're going to regret later.